Well, this is my favorite subject. I have a long history with psilocybin. I would like to ask first, and it's a legally legitimate question for you to answer. So, how many people here have not taken psilocybin mushrooms? Oh, young Jedi. The microverse awaits you. Okay, so I could carve that up in different ways, but that subset's good enough. So I think mushrooms are, for me, a gateway into infinity, into the divine. And I have postulated this for a long time. And Rupert, I'm super honored to have finally met you, and you're very gracious and generous in your comments. But this whole thing on quantum theory and the multiverse, it's just getting more and more credible in my own life as time goes on. So without further ado, I'm going to take you into some extraordinary research that others have been doing, some of the research that I have done. And I think it's opens up, a new understanding of the quote unquote reality that we all share. So, are you on the bus? Yeah. All right. Well, now you're on the bus. Let's take the next quantum leap in human consciousness. So, another voyage into the microverse and the paradigm shift. First, I want to just give you a super brief description of the mushroom life cycle. When you see mushrooms, fleshy mushrooms, they're highly perishable. They're only up for 5 or 7 days, maybe 10 days at most, and generally before they rot. It's the mycelial underground that is resident in the ecosystem for literally years, months, even decades, hundreds of years, sometimes before these mushrooms surface, and then they reproduce. Mushrooms produce spores. Generally speaking, 2 spores come together. They're sexually compatible. They mate. And, come back here. And when they mate, then if they're compatible, then the mycelium is binucleate, 2 nuclei per cell, and then it's fully capable of producing fertile offspring. So this stage of the mushroom life cycle is very, very short. This stage is 95 to 99% of the life cycle of the organism. Here is a time lapse of Psilocybe cubensis over 5 days. And the mycelium is growing out and is constantly diverging. And at these tips is where is a fertile area for epigenesis. The tips of mycelium become multinucleate. They're exploring as a really rapid cellular reproduction. And think of them as like little scientists that are coding and meeting new potential food sources, a new adversary, a pollutant. Because of epigenesis, which is basically the elicitation of a genomic expression from an external environmental stimulus. If there's a new coding, then that in the enzyme that's being produced, the antibiotic, whatever the case may be, if it gives benefit to the mycelium and allows it to have more food, then what happens? The information back channels into the mycelial network. So these are self-learning membranes. They pick up knowledge. They're constantly experimenting, and they are so adaptive to catastrophia. And since we're the greatest walking catastrophe I know on the planet, they walk behind us, literally picking up in the debris fields that our footsteps create. Interestingly, many, if not most of the psilocybin mushrooms are associated with human activities. This is not an accident. I think these are trail followers, and I think they're calling out to us at a time critical that we need to listen to them. The largest organism in the world so far is a mycelial mat in eastern Oregon, 2,200 acres in size, over 2,000 years old, and it's 1 cell wall thick. Now, I'm a microbiologist by training. We do what's called colony-forming units. Basically, we count how many microbes there are in a gram or a milliliter of water or a gram of soil. It's really common to get 1 million to 10 million, 50 million microbes per gram. Soil literally is a living population of microorganisms. So you consider this as 2,200 acres in size, the largest organism anywhere in the world. It only has 1 cell layer, on the other side of which are all these hungry microbes, many of which would like to consume it. How is it possible? It's possible because of epigenesis, and that these have innate immune systems that over millions of years have developed the strategies to be able to defend themselves against predators and be able to conquer great landscapes. So the mycelium, I spent many years as a scanning electron microscopist. I'm going to show you some of my electron micrographs. And so the mycelium, under 4 primary stimuli, forms mushrooms. So the mycelium grows, and then after occupies a certain niche or so. If there's an introduction of water, well, we all know that, it rains. And when you have rain, you have evaporative cooling, so you have a dropping of temperature. Third, as the top of the soil gets wet, the mycelium, reaches the tops of the soil and then exhales carbon dioxide, inhales oxygen. The CO2-rich environment of the soil is not conducive to mushroom formation, generally speaking, but when it comes to the surface, it then exhales carbon dioxide, inhales oxygen. So the third stimulus is exposure to oxygen. The fourth one is quite surprising to many people, is light. 99% of all mushroom species require light. They have no chlorophyll, but they're phototropic. The button mushroom you buy in the store is really unusual because it's not light dependent. So those 4 environmental stimuli, introduction of water, dropping of temperature, exposure to oxygen, exposure to light, then can trigger mushroom mycelium to form mushrooms. The absence of which, you can age that mycelium for a long time and they won't produce any mushrooms. Primordia are little baby mushrooms. They form. Now these cells are highly multinucleate. It's exploding, rapid growth. And then the mycelium aggregates to form a baby mushroom. Now, there's so many interconnections with bees here, but blue light stimulates mushrooms to form, 320 to 400 nanometers. We can see down to 400 nanometers. Bees can see down to 300. What I didn't mention in my bee talk is that I speculate, hypothesis, not proven, is the bees are cruising through the forest looking for these wicking veins of mycelium coming up because they give them access to something called p-coumaric acid that activates the cytochrome P450 pathway. All animals use that, their detoxification pathway. P-coumaric acid coming from wood is the only chemical that activates the bees' detoxification pathways. Without p-coumaric acid, the bees can't detoxify. So neonicotinoids, pollution, all that stuff builds up and makes them sick on top of the viruses. So that's another sort of connection here. So I'm wondering if the bees are actually looking for blue mycelium because that's in the ultraviolet range. So here's a mature mushroom. The mushroom rots. A few days later, I go back. My foot is covering, there's about 8 miles of mycelium, a single inch of soil. I estimate my foot covers between 300 and 600 miles of mycelium. That's how pervasive it is. These this is the not so invisible landscape underneath every foot that you take. So when you're walking across an ecosystem, you're leaving impressions on these highly evolved, fungal fabrics that are responsive. They know that you are there. These are highly evolved sensory membranes. And because of the competition for food, if you break a stick, a lot of fungi want to get that new wood access. And so they leap up in competition. So generally speaking, first to food wins, and communities survive better than individuals. So the mycelium sets up the microbiome. I've done next-gen sequencing of mycelial networks and found up to 1,000-fold difference in the relative genera of bacteria from the same wood chips colonized by one mushroom species versus another. I've never published this, but this clearly shows that the mushroom mycelium sets up the microbiome in the ecosystem that is resident in the ecosystem that gives rise to the foliage and the trees that create the debris fields that feed the mycelium that protects the progeny of the fungal species that are dominant underneath the tree. So they're actually deterministic in setting up the ecosystem landscapes. So much of the mycelium is extracellular digestive enzymes, which are basically for getting food, but they're also contain antibiotics, antiviral compounds, messenger compounds. They're extremely complex. There can be more than 1,000 species of bacteria existing in a single gram of soil. So the majority of bacteria are adversarial to mycelium, but the mycelium got very smart very early and created mutualistic relationships with commensal bacteria. So then by having this commensal bacteria that are mutualistic with the mycelium, the antibacterial properties from those bacteria then also would help to defend the mother mycelium that sets up the matrices to create the microbiome that ensures those mutualistic bacteria have a better advantage against their competitors. So very complex. Mycelial networks, pervade these little cavities. There's no specific place you can harm the mycelium. Here's a vein of mycelium surfacing in the woods. So as a result, there's always an alternative pathway for the mycelium to be able to, if there's a break, there's an alternative pathway for the mycelium to be able to stream nutrients. When you break mycelium, it forks. So it's one of the few organisms that benefits from concussion. And mushroom growers long ago figured out that when their mushroom beds stop producing, they can take a rake and they can rake the mycelium to break it. And then a flush of mushrooms will come up. So it's one of the few organisms that actually benefits from disturbance. My friend Patrick Hickey made these movies. They're extraordinary. We didn't know that the nuclei flew in bundles or streamed in bundles. Hundreds of nuclei streamed through these networks. Look really carefully. They're not all going in the same direction. There's about 2 to 4% of them are going reverse cytoplasmic flow. We suspect that these are kind of packets of DNA with knowledge in them to help educate the rest of the mycelial mat. So I'm going to wax poetic. I've talked about this for a long time. And as I mentioned, I am becoming more and more convinced. There are some truths in nature that are universal. You just know that makes sense. That's right. Self-obvious universal truths. And this is one of them. The organization of neurons mimics that with the same archetype as that of mycelium. The organization of the computer internet also conforms the same archetype shared by mycelium. And let's go back to the very origins of the universe. 13.8 billion years ago was the Big Bang. All this star matter exploded throughout the cosmos. And then this is from the Max Planck Institute after the Big Bang. You'll see these parsecs change. 1 parsec is 3.26 light years. You're going to see the greatest expanse of the universe so far presented in a computer model. So that's 3.9 megaparsecs. So in light years, and now we're going to go back. Those are galaxies and stars, and then you begin to see dark matter, and you go further and further out. So the greatest expanse of the universe also conforms to that of network theory, and that sharing the same archetype of that of the mycelium. So you look at dark matter through the Deep Hubble telescope. There's I think 180,000 galaxies in this one deep field view. And the cobweb of dark matter nets them all together. As most of you know, more than 90% of the matter in the universe cannot be seen. But this does explain why the galaxies are spreading further apart and not contracting. So we go to 4.5 billion years ago. The Earth coalesced out of stardust. And then after 4.5 billion years ago, about 200 million years later, many of you may not know this, we had a visitor, a Mars-like planet, came and slammed into the Earth, planet Theia. Planet Theia slammed into the Earth, enormous rubble field occurred, it coalesced and formed our moon. And so this is when the Apollo astronauts went to the moon and came back, they were astonished that the mineral profiles were the same as that as Earth. And so that gave substantiation to the formation of the moon with planet Theia. And Bruce gave a great talk yesterday about interfaces and tidal poles. He's so right on. Because with the moon, then we had a tidal fluctuation at the interface environments. Life came from the sea onto land because those margins were kept on changing. Well, the last universal common ancestor is 3.8 billion years ago. It's a single-celled organism called Luca. Oh, hell, Luca! No, I'm sorry. You have to have seen Dr. Strangelove to understand that joke, okay? If you haven't seen Dr. Strangelove, you should watch that clip. You'll understand. Okay, but so Luca was a single-celled organism. So we march forward to 2.4 billion years ago in South African lava, just recently discovered. The first evidence of a multicellular organism was that of mycelium. Now, animals split from fungi. Fungi gave birth to animals. 650 million years ago, a new super kingdom that's been erected by scientists called a Paislacanta. That's when fungi and animalia were joined. 650 million years ago, fungi gave birth to animals. Animals went, encompassing its food in a cellular sac, and the fungi continued to externally digest its nutrients outside of the cellular network. So 1.8 billion years later, this means we are descendants of mycelium. We are descendants of fungi. These are our mothers and our fathers. So we go forward to 420 million years ago, discovered in Quebec and Saudi Arabia and elsewhere. 1843, the fossil was given the name Prototaxides. It was over 10 meters, about 35 feet long, 40 feet long. Laying down was a meter high, about 3 feet high. And At that time, this is before vascular plants, before flying insects. There were ferns, but even at 3 meter high, it's the tallest organism on land 420 million years ago. Well, these were in fact standing up. And Dr. Kevin Boyce determined what these were because they were a mystery for over 100 years. Because people thought they were trees, but the tree hadn't evolved yet. And they turned out to be giant fungi, dotting across the face of the earth, the tallest organisms on land, with these pillar-like fungi that would attract lightning, electromagnetic fields, obviously, a lot of lightning strikes. It would strike the highest points on land. Perfect place for epigenesis, rapid evolution, stimulation of electricity, microbiomes being established. And then we go forward to about 250 million years ago at the Permian-Triassic boundary, and we have another celestial visitor. And this comes in. Now, this caused a great extinction event at the PT boundary. And there's 3 competing theories: an asteroid impact. There's earthquakes that could have jettisoned methane hydrate from the ocean, or there is volcanoes in Eurasia that spout up all sorts of debris. I don't think them as mutually exclusive. The asteroid impact could have happened first, created the earthquakes, caused the fissures in the ocean, all this gas and debris jettisoned in the atmosphere. We had a massive extinction event. The Earth was shrouded in dust. Massive numbers of plants and animals died, and fungi inherited the Earth. Now, the Permian-Triassic boundary is really distinct, before and after. And actually, in the fossil record, they found the dominant fungus at the PT boundary was given a name, Reduviasporinites. So this is the one that gobbled up the majority of the forests. It's dominant in the fossil record directly at that margin that you saw earlier, and that's the dominant fungus that was found. So those organisms that paired with fungi had a better chance of survival because the fungi were growing underground. As fungi decompose debris, it generates heat. There's an exothermic reaction. You all know this from compost piles, etc. So even with those giant debris fields and the earth is shrouded in dust and temperatures plummeted, the soil layers were cooking because of thermogenesis and the exothermic reaction of fungi gobbling up the debris. We go forward to 400 million years ago, time of Pangaea, Gondwana land, and you have separation of the continents. And I like to reflect. And when I was in the 3rd grade, I raised my hand in geology class. And I said, "Teacher, that looks like the continents all fit together as a puzzle." And she goes, "No, it's a coincidence." I think scientists better listen to 3rd graders more often, right? So we go forward now, and this was just recently discovered and published 110 million years ago. This is, they're in the sediments, and mushrooms are very decomposable, so it's hard to find mushrooms in sediments, but they found one, and they give it a name, Gondwana agaricides magnificus, 110 million years ago in the early Cretaceous in Brazil, a perfectly shaped mushrooms. Why I'm showing this is that mushrooms are ancient organisms. Mushrooms had their forms long before we had ours. And so we advance forward now to 65 million years ago. You all know this story. We definitely had an asteroid impact in the Yucatan area. And a huge extinction event. Thank goodness the dinosaurs became extinct, in my opinion. After watching Jurassic Park a few times, but the same thing, debris fields, shut off the sun, massive extinction, fungi then re-inherited the earth. There's a repeating theme here, folks. If you want to survive extinction events, pairing with fungi give you a better chance of survival. And that's what we are faced now today. So we'll look at the earth today, and then we'll jump way forward, but let's talk about primates. There's 22 primates that are known to consume mushrooms. 23, including humans, were primates. And the Golgi monkey consumes 12 times its body weight in a year. Americans consume about less than 3%, 1.9 kilograms. So these primates know the difference between edible and poisonous mushrooms. They are dependent, upon them for sustenance. And the reward of natural evolution, the better you know your environment, the more food you have, the better chance of survival. Well, that's, I think, speaks to a very ancient, broad knowledge of the coevolution of fungi and animals and coevolution of fungi and primates leading to us. Now, I'm not sure if Rupert's in the room. Rupert, are you in the room? I don't know if he is or not, but he nailed it he just said something, 200,000, 202 million, exactly right. The Homo sapiens brain suddenly exploded. And basically, the limited number of fossils, we can't calculate this exactly, but the human brain suddenly increased 2 to 3-fold between 200,000 to 2 million years ago. And how and why? Now, in the evolutionary context, that's really, really quick compared to the evolution of other animals. So what caused the human brain to suddenly expand? And I want to resurrect something that Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna brought up called the stoned ape theory. Now, Homo sapiens were late arrivals in Europe. They came in around 40,000 years ago. Homo erectus and Neanderthals were there first. But within 4,000 years of contact of Homo sapiens, they did 2 migrations. The first migration failed. The second migration of Homo sapiens was successful 40,000 years ago. Within 4,000 years of contact, we made Neanderthals extinct. And Homo erectus became extinct. If you've done a 23andMe test, I'm 3.5% Neanderthal. I'm proud of it. Can you tell? I'm kind of a hairy guy. So now the expansion of the human brain size also was correlated to climate change when there's a sudden drying of the climate. So Terence McKenna, was a good friend of mine. And I love Terence, especially the last 5 years of his life, because he made fun of himself. But as Dennis said, if only 10% of what Terence said is true, then his contribution is enormous. And I will tell you, and I've told Terence, time wave 0 was total bullshit. If you know about that. He had the end of time happening on his birthday, and he said that the birth and death of Christ was not a historically significant event because it was anti-Christian. I'm sorry, Terence, that just does not wash with me. But this does. And bless his heart, he came up with something when he was tripping on psilocybin mushrooms in South America. And it's a stoned ape theory is what he calls it. So this is a little clip. Louis Schwartzberg and I are doing a movie together. And the stoned ape theory, as he postulated, our hominid ancestors, due to climate change, would come out of the trees, go across the savannas. You go across the savannas, you're tracking animals. What do you find? Scat, poop. You release down what is the largest mushroom growing in poop and common in the subtropics is Psilocybe cubensis. You're hungry. The majority of primates eat grub, insects laying eggs and mushrooms. The primate eats these, and suddenly they have this amazing expansion of consciousness. They're sharing it with their friends, their family. They're having a unity of consciousness. The floodgates of the sentence open up, and it leads to neurogenesis, the building of new neurological pathways. And so the brain then suddenly began to evolve. Now, how many times would this happen? Well, think about it. You're a hunter, you look for footprints, you look for scat, you find mushrooms. You're hungry with your clan. This will not happen once, twice, 10,000 times, but millions upon millions upon millions of times over millions upon millions of years. The opportunity for epigenesis is so profound that this is not a possibility in my mind. But as Bruce mentioned yesterday, this is a probability. If the field of data is large enough, the improbable becomes likely. So, Psilocybe cubensis grows on elephant dung. Look how big that thing is. You're hungry. It's fleshy. You consume it. It bruises bluish. You very quickly realize that these bluish mushrooms give you, an extraordinary state of mind. So, and the other mushroom that grows with is Copelandia cyanescens, or bispora. And these are also psilocybin active mushrooms. So you have a minor player and a major player. Okay, so it is not a theory, it's a hypothesis. But just to be clear about this, psilocybin degrades into psilocin, it tightly binds and activates serotonin receptors, stimulating neurogenesis. It's a serotonin agonist. It substitutes for serotonin. Now, the very interesting and bizarre thing is that mycelium produces serotonin. And these are neurologically framed networks that are benefiting from epigenesis. So I have all these debates with my older brother, Bill, and I stated in one of my books that I believe nature is intelligent. He goes, "You can't say that. You'll be mocked. That's academically indefensible." He's very much smarter than me. So I'm always on the defensive, like, "Whoa, calm down, Bill." So I thought, wait a second, Bill. You're saying nature cannot be intelligent, that humans are. I said, you know the hypocrisy of that statement, that you using the brain that nature gave you to articulate the ridiculous argument that nature is not intelligent? He looked stunned. I said, I'd rest my case. I needed to back out of that conversation as fast as I could. He's much more. He would come up with a clever answer. So I wanted to. Okay, so it's not a theory. It's a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an educated guess to explain an observable phenomenon. A theory is a hypothesis that has been tested by science and factually supported. Now, I'm saying this now, but as evidence builds, the hypothesis of the Stone Age theory, Stone Age may become actually a theory, because the evidence is becoming overwhelmingly favorable on neurogenesis. So, a number of scientific studies. I'm a science nerd, and so a lot of studies. In fact, one study just came out yesterday that I'll be talking about. But the extinction of the conditioned fear response, and this was with mice, and they were associating pain with a sound. And so then when they heard the sound, they cowered in pain. They dosed them with mushrooms, and they had a dissociative response with the sound. They were able to dissociate the fear-based response to that stimulus. So it was an opportunity to realign behavior. So anyhow, the low doses of psilocybin facilitated an extinction of the conditioned fear response to life-threatening events. Okay, you're a hominid. You're going across the savannah. Saber-toothed tigers attack your clan. Devastated, your clan barely escaped. You trip on these mushrooms. You think, well, next time I'm not going to let this saber-toothed tiger attack my family. So it dissociates you and makes you then potentially more courageous. Psilocybin induces courage and kindness. People want to support leaders who are courageous and strong, but have their best interests in mind. They know they have the benefit of the commons is more important than their own individual benefit. Those are the leaders we need, and those are the leaders we respect. And I can think of a few leaders right now who could benefit from dosing themselves on psilocybin. Donald Trump, don't invite me to a White House dinner. Oh, yeah. Or please do invite me to a White House dinner. These are leadership skills. McDonald's needs a mushroom burger. And it makes you into a better citizen. Why? Well, this is the great, and Nancy Reagan, bless your heart, but which brain do you want, Nancy? The placebo or the one on psilocybin? It's a connectogram showing increased intercommunity crosstalk after psilocybin ingestion, even though there's more nodes of crossing. Even though that the brain doesn't light up as much, there's a lot more crosstalk between the individual brains. So I wanted to go forward to the bee shaman. This is about 5,000 year BCE in northern Algeria. The first image you'll see is the actual cave art. It took forever to find this. Then a friend of mine, Jonathan Meter, redrew it. There's the actual cave art in northern Algeria. Now it's being redrawn to be true to form. And this is really interesting. There's a long association of putting magic mushrooms in honey, especially in Mesoamerica. But in 1516, under the pressure from the Catholic Church, mushrooms were banned from beer. And so there are psychoactive meads practiced being ingested by Germanic peoples, in particular in Europe, and perhaps the Druids, where they were worshiping nature in forests. And because the average lifespan was only 20, 25 years of age, reproduction was really important. People lost their mates very young, but they still had reproductive potential. So the idea of being able to recouple was then institutionalized into forest worship with these rituals of psychoactive meads. The church saw this as a threat to monotheism, and so they banned mushrooms, henbane, and magical plants from beer, and the Bavarian Beer Purity Act codified this. So they could only have hops, sugar, malt, and water and yeast. Of course, there's wheat in there too. So these mushroom stones have been found in the western slopes of Guatemala. The conquistadors, when they came over in the early 1500s, the edict from the Pope is to destroy all idols. These were thought to be idolatry. They brought over an extraordinary number of diseases. The population was described as being immunologically naive. They had no history of contact with syphilis. Tuberculosis is questionable, but certainly not smallpox and many of the flu viruses. So they were devastated. The shamans could not protect their people. The shamans lost face, and the Christians then promised everlasting life, something that was new to them, if they converted to Catholicism. And then they pressured the converts then to snitch on their neighbors. And so these mushroom stones were hidden from view and destroyed by the thousands with sledgehammers by the Catholic priests in the center of cities. And then the mushroom cults went underground for fear of persecution. So these were largely found by farmers, in the past 100 years, tilling their fields. And they'd pop up these mushroom stones out of the ground. This one at Sotheby's here is sold for $1.2 million. I'd like to mention it because I called them up before it went up. And I talked to the curator of the Denver Museum, and I said, what is this little character holding? And she goes, I don't know. It's a big debate. And I go, well, do me a favor. And I said, you have it nearby? He goes, yeah, it's right in front of me as I'm talking to you. Do me a favor and look underneath the little cap here and tell me if you see ridges. And she turns it over and goes, yeah, there's a bunch of ridges. I go, do you ever think they were mushrooms? Dead silence, right? Again, hiding in plain sight. That which is so obvious is invisible to those people who are blinded to the possibilities. I'm honored to be the temporary custodian of 17 mushroom stones. They've come to me over the years, twice through the wills of both kinds of fathers who died, said Paul Stamets understands the significance of these. This is what they're worth. They were sold on the art market, still being sold today. They're banned, of course, from being taken from Guatemala. I fully intend to return them to Guatemala. That's in my will. But I've had two Guatemalan officials who've been friendly to me, who've come to visit me, says, don't dare return them to the Guatemalan government. They'll just sell them off until they corrupt. In my will, I want a ceremonial ceremony where these mushroom stones are returned to the Mayan people on a Mayan temple. That's my will. But if I can find the right Mayan group, so any indigenous people out there, I am looking for the right people to preserve and protect this so they won't sell them off. So I just got another mushroom stone, just came to me in the past week. So I'm up to 18 of these. There's only 200 in the world. So a shaman came to visit me, and he's been to some of these conferences, and he saw them all in boxes. And he goes, Paul, that's not right. I said, what? I said, I'm worried about earthquakes. And he goes, these want to be out. These want to breathe. You have them captured in little cardboard boxes with all this foam around them. But I'm terrified they'll break on my watch. So I listened to him and I said, you're right. So he left. I had this epiphany and I put him in a circle. And when I put these in a circle, it reverberated. And the one in the center is 2,500 years old. I have a provenance on that from Peter First. The other ones, they went through 2,500 years to about 1,500 years ago. When I put them together, I have a community. I have a community of Mayan shamans. And I walk by them every single day. They're right in my living room. They've taken over my living room. And so I feel now the pulse of history, of shamans. I feel like I'm truly a messenger, carrying ancient knowledge and advancing it forward for future generations. So this is what fuels me. This is what I see constantly every day. Okay, I'm going to have to really speed this up, folks. Okay, but those of you who are clinicians and particularly in therapists, I very much encourage you to stay to see two individuals at the end of their life from the Johns Hopkins research. It's really important. So across millions of households in America, in 1957, the Life magazine was delivered with a very good psilocybin mushroom field guide. And this is something that's interesting to me. Here's Demeter giving Persephone a mushroom, présente. This is how you give a sacrament. You don't go, here, take this. You go, pay attention. Look at me. This is what I'm giving you. Do you understand? This is important. That's a very, very common gesture that I've seen over and over again. Well, Maria Sabina did something similar, giving it to R. Gordon Wasson here. And then my brother John, is giving me psilocybe semilanciata. And I told him about this. Présente. You need to give it with respect. So My brother John was a very big and important person in my life. He went to Yale on break. He went down to Mexico and Colombia. He had an extraordinary interest in psychoactive substances. I got really excited because of him and started getting into mushrooms. And so John came back with this book. And John said, never show this photograph in public. Sorry, John. And he came back with a book by Charles Tart, which one of the speakers referred to yesterday about blew my mind. And, oh my God, Charles Tart's up there again. And Altered States of Consciousness. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My best friend, Ryan Snyder, he's my sidekick. We hang together all the time. I'm reading this book. Ryan's interested in what I'm interested in, so he wants to borrow the book. I said, listen, John's going back to Yale in 2 weeks. I have to give it back to him before he goes back to class, so give the book back to me. So Ryan borrowed the book, and a few days later, Ryan, John's going back. He's asking about the book. Please give it back to me. And Ryan's hesitating and hemming and hawing. And I say a few days later, and now John's really pressuring me. And I'm going, Ryan, where's my friggin' book, my brother's friggin' book? And Ryan sheepishly looked at me and said, Paul, I can't give it back to you. And I said, why? And he says, my dad discovered it and burned it. I said, your dad burned my brother's book? And I was shocked. And I was terrified to tell my older brother. And I told him he was not happy. And he was really unhappy with me. And I thought, I'm going to make this into something good. If this book and its subject was so disturbing to Ryan Snyder's father, then I think I found the subject field of interest that I want to explore. So John, went to Yale, went to the University of Washington Neurophysiology School. He became very well known as a photographer when he chose that as his career. So I was always trying to impress my brother John. I'm the youngest kid in the family, and we grew up with a big laboratory in the basement in Columbia, Ohio, and we had the Intrepid aircraft carrier radio because my dad served on that aircraft carrier. We had that in the basement, so I listened to coded message. But John was a serious scientist. He had rows and rows of chemicals and whatnot. And so I would take John, and John and I tripped a lot together, so it was really great. A family that trips together stays together. It was great bonding. But John was always like, being the alpha brother. Paul, not good enough. So I got vetted and awarded by the AAAS, the American Academy of Advancement of Science, that produces Science Magazine, as the first invention ambassador of AAAS. So the group of 7 of us, including the founder of digital photography. And so I got this award. I had to go through a gauntlet of interviews and all this stuff, and they want messengers who can message science to the public, who are inventors, who have patents, who are inventing things. And so I got chosen. So I got my award letter. I was really excited. I got, damn it, brother, I can show you now. I got an award, from AAAS. And so I was real excited. I called my brother John several times on a Friday night, and he didn't answer. And that was the day he died. He never answered the phone. So because of John's encouragement and criticism and mentorship, I've chosen this career. So other people who've influenced me a lot, Dr. Michael Bugh on the left, Alexander Smith holding the big mushrooms there, then Kit Skates down below, and Daniel Stuntz. They all passed on. They were all what we call politically conservative, which is really extraordinary because I showed up at the Evergreen State College and started studying under Michael Bugh and then met these other giants in the field of mycology. This is what I look like. Your suspicions are now confirmed. By the way, guys, I was the first guy to go through puberty in my high school, from my age group. Anyhow, that's why I have so much hair when I'm 19 years of age. We got a Drug Enforcement Administration license. Michael Bugh did, and that umbrellaed us. And then very strange, Jonathan Ott, Jeremy Bigwood, and myself all went and studied under Michael Bugh. And between the 3 of us, I think we have 14 or 15 books on psychoactive plants and mushrooms between us. So really, really nerdy professor, fun, really great professor. Love him still. But he got the DEA license. And so Jeremy and I, the guy in the middle, and myself, we were umbrellaed with a Drug Enforcement Administration license. And I thought everybody was a DEA agent. So I'm a solitary kind of guy anyhow. But anyone came up to me, I thought, yeah, you're an agent. I can tell, And so I got tempted and bribed all these sorts of times, and I always turned everybody down. So I never got in trouble. But it's really extraordinary. And then at the same time, Terrence McKenna, Gary Menzer, Stephen Pollack, and Andy Weil. This is all in the 1970s. Those of you who are interested, please pick up Harper's Magazine. and read the story on Stephen Pollock. He was a physician in San Antonio, Texas. I was speaking to him on the phone when he was murdered with a .357 Magnum. Horrible story. I called up several times later. The police answered the phone. The policeman who answered the phone was the killer, and knew Steve had a lot of money. And so I said, crazy story. You have to read it to believe it. And then we did a series of psychoactive mushroom conferences through the late 70s, into 2000. And I knew the merry pranksters and I knew the psychedelic scientists. So I thought, why don't we bring them all together? So I knew both communities. And so we did the 1999 Brighton Bush Millennial Mushroom Conference. And there's Andy Weil there, Sasha Shulgin, a lot of top psychonauts, Christian Retsch, and a whole bunch of other, David Aurora, a whole bunch of people. We had 45 speakers and 60 paying participants. So I lost $50,000. I don't lose it. It was the best investment I ever made because I got all these people together. Then the psychoactivity conferences, in Europe occurred, and there's Sasha Shulgin there for those people. How many people here knew who Sasha Shulgin was? Created hundreds of new psychoactive molecules. Anyhow, a number of books then came out, and there's 5 of my books there. But I love the book, The Golden Guide to Hallucinatory Plants. What every third grader needs to learn, You got minerals, you got birds, you got fish, and you got psychoactive plants. This is because a hippie inherited the Golden Guide fortune totally into psychedelics. He commissioned this, and of course the PTAs and everybody across the country up in arms. So it was a one-print edition. These are worth $500 a piece now. So then the Philosophy Cubensis Scholarship Fund is what I call it. Then permeated throughout the universities and colleges all over the world, especially in California. And people grow psilocybin mushrooms in jars on grain. People didn't get rich from this. They paid their tuition. They bought groceries, put the money back into the community. But it was very much a very, very common practice. I went on to discover 4 new psilocybin active species: Psilocybe azurescens, Psilocybe lentiformis, Psilocybe centrifugosa, and one I named after Dr. Andrew Weil. Now, to be very clear here, I've driven a line in the sand. Nature provides, I don't. Okay? The freedom of information protects books. It doesn't protect me from telling you how to grow psilocybin mushrooms verbally. So don't ask me for psilocybin mushrooms. Nature provides, I don't. But I have a passion for this. So this was in the vault. I pulled it out about 2 months ago. So this is kind of fun.
Greetings, and meet Psilocybe azurescens. Psilocybe azurescens is probably one of the most potent mushrooms in the world. It contains psilocybin and psilocin up to 2% of its dried mass. Now think of that. 2% of the dried mass of this mushroom are psychoactive crystals. Why would a mushroom produce so much? We don't know, but it certainly has attracted the interest of humans. The bluing that you see here is a bruising reaction. It's indicative of psilocin as it degrades. And the more bluing you see, the more psilocin there once was. Now, psilocybin dephosphorylates into psilocin, and when you ingest these mushrooms, psilocin becomes a serotonin agonist. It means that the psilocybin or the psilocin becomes a temporary neurotransmitter, opening up the floodgates of the senses. Now, this mushroom is sinuous. It's got a sinuous stem, which means it bends back and forth. It's bluing very, very strongly, and it has these very indicative spore color here on the annular zone. And the spore color is purple-brown, and the mushrooms are bluish. Those two features in combination pretty much de facto determines its psilocybe. Now look how bodacious the rhizomorphs are at the base of the stem. This is a large psilocybe, by far the largest one that I know that grows on wood chips in the Pacific Northwest. It is now a popular one to have in your backyard. It's just fun. It's just naturalized in the woods here. And this is a beautiful fruiting of them. And the psilocybes, many of the woodland psilocybes have this chestnut brown to caramel color. This one is unique in that it's got these umbos, and it's a broad umbo, and the cap is very circular. The bruising reactions just from impact of rain, perhaps. This mushroom is one of the most fascinating and interesting ones to grow. Those who choose to partake of this mushroom should be warned. These are exceptionally potent. and oftentimes they can cause temporary paralysis, loss of muscle control. So that is not a good thing. It seems that most people who boil this mushroom in hot water, those symptoms seem to be alleviated. But this is clearly a sacred species, and I love just personally touching it. This is not a mushroom that I enjoy eating. It's almost too potent for me, and but it is a species that I greatly admire. I love touching it. I love handling it. I love seeing it, and it's a great indicator of the habitat in my magical mushroom forest that is very conducive to spiritual experiences.
These mushrooms now have spread all over California, as many of you know. There's a strong association with internet companies, wood chips, and psilocybin mushrooms. Yeah. I wonder why. So, Psilocybe baeocystis is another species that's hidden in the landscape. I have another story about that. I'll pass. But there are compounds, psilocybin and psilocin. Everything, the psilocybin degrades to psilocin. And there's serotonin, which is chemically in a structure very, very similar. There's another compound called baeocystin. Baeocystin is not illegal. It also is pharmacologically active, and the methyl group there is easily cleaved by normal enzymes. That's a normal part. A lot of your digestive systems is cleaving off those methylated groups. So that's really interesting to me. So from those psychotherapists out there, I think the potential of using baeocystin should be also examined. Psilocybe stuntzii, after Daniel Stuntz, alenii are two other species, the Psilocybe semilanciata and Psilocybe pelliculosa. Liberty crabs grow in grasslands, from Ireland down in the grasslands in Chile to, of course, Western North America, etc. So, and here is another little knowledge
Throughout
bomb.
the temperate regions of Europe and the Pacific Northwest, one of the most interesting psilocybes to collect is one that grows near ponds in the grass. And this field has not had cows on it for more than 10 years. So cows and sheep can help, but they're not necessary. And this is Psilocybe semilanciata, the famed liberty cap. It's exquisite little fruiting here. It's got a translucent striate margin. You can see the striations. They're actually the gills showing through the cap. And the cap also has a separable gelatinous pellicle. So here is one over here we can look at. And as you tear the cap, there is a film that's clearly visible. And you can say, whoa, that's a really big one. And that film stretches and then breaks. So these mushrooms have purple-brown spores, a separable gelatinous pellicle, and they typically have a sharp umbo or nipple at the very, very top of the cap. And this papilla, or nipple, is not always in every specimen, but it's quite characteristic of the species in general. So, Psilocybe semilanciata. Many people, when they pick semilanciata, they don't realize that the stem is so long. I think it's a mutualistic species with the rhizomes of grass, almost like a pseudo-mycorrhizal relationship, which means it's not obligatory, but it benefits from it. And the stems often are picked because people don't realize that the stem length goes way, way down. So be careful. Always try to get the base of the stem if you can.
Okay, so a number of clinical studies have come out. Many of you know about this. Johns Hopkins was really one of the first articles that came out, a pioneering article clinically showing that mystical-like experiences had significance 14 months post-ingestion. Relatively high dose of psilocybin, 30 milligrams. 70% of the individuals reported positive experiences. 30% reported negative experiences. But interestingly, the people who had the negative experiences did not extend beyond the experience itself. The people who had positive experiences 14 months later, talking to their family members, their associates, the family members, associates, and loved ones notice a significant change in the personality of the individuals. And they still, in remembering the experience, gave them further benefit. This is the extraordinary thing. With PTSD, you remember, the terrible thing that happened to you, you become re-traumatized. Well, this is the exact opposite of that. Remembering the positive experience of psilocybin had a demonstrable benefit. An extraordinary study. It's a survey with prisoners, 480,000 people surveyed by DSHS. And they found there was association, not causation, but it can be, But those people who had a psilocybin experience were associated with 27% decrease of larceny and theft, 22% decreased odds for property crime, 18% decreased odds for violent crime. In a group of 1,266 community members, ages 16 to 70, there was this just recently came out. I think it was in 2018. Yep. This is really interesting. In couples, if the man had tripped on psilocybin, there was a statistically significant negative correlation with spousal abuse. Interestingly, it didn't cross-correlate with women. So men who tripped on mushrooms tend to be nicer to their spouses. I think that is extraordinarily interesting. Then the emotional responsiveness in depression, more articles, there are clinical studies coming out left and right. And Compass has just been approved in many countries, including the United States, as an emergency treatment for treatment-resistant depression. That just came out in the news last week. And a reset therapeutic mechanism is being proposed. The opportunity with therapy, this is important, this is where therapists really come in to play, because the benefits without therapy are less permanent, I guess is one way of saying it, than with therapy. When you have guided therapy with somebody who's experienced, they can help you rebuild your emotive response. I think as it assists in neurogenesis, you're repatterning, you're generating new neurons, you find alternative pathways to express yourself, and you build upon these through talking about them. So another article that came out here is 2017. And I think many of you know this. And this is a great article. I love this article. 2018. Well, if you trip on mushrooms, you have increased nature relatedness and a decreased tendency toward authoritarian political views. Several people have recommended I run for president, and this will be my platform, right? You take psilocybin? Yes. Next question. I won't avoid any question. I'll wave my psychedelic flag, tall and high. So. Okay, so this is what I want your therapist to watch. Louis Schwartzberg and I are doing a movie together. We've been making it for 12 years called Fantastic Fungi. Louis, I acknowledge you and thank you for this clip. And thank you, Johns Hopkins Medical School, for allowing us to show you this clip of 2 patients. And this is really quite potent.
Anyone who's had one of those experiences in a country where it's not legal to have them is stuck in this position where something really precious and really giving, a great gift to you, is not understood by the culture at large, and furthermore puts you or other people at risk of prosecution. And one response to that is to get angry and to want to fight that. And another response to it is to say, we just got to explain to people what's going on here. And when people understand it, then there will be accommodation and respect.
I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer. My diagnosis was so bad that it was, they weren't giving me any chance whatsoever.
My diagnosis was kidney cancer. Finding out that you may want to get your affairs in order.
I first found out about the study when my oncologist gave me a pamphlet. He said, here's something that might be able to help you with the anxiety. And I was accepted into the study.
The most important thing is to remember that you're always safe. And a recommendation is that whatever is coming up, that you allow it, that you don't have to like it, but you say, okay, rather than trying to run away from it. Once a volunteer is enrolled in the study, they're with us for the preparation, the psilocybin sessions, and the integration follow-ups after. I have been a guide for around 350 psilocybin sessions, and then about 1,000 of the preparatory and integration meetings.
All right.
It's really just about experiencing what comes up as the psilocybin takes effect.
And the intense part of this journey, this world and things that matter to most people, family and all that wasn't even what it was about. They say anything mystical can't be explained. It's something like that. It's a feeling of such immense power that you can't even imagine. I've never felt anything like it before. It was about being in a place of infinite space and just being there.
There's an experience of positive mood, sometimes open-heartedness, love, transcendence of time and space, and then finally it's thought to be ineffable. People say, I can't describe that experience.
In my mind, I said, okay, hold it. If I give myself over to you, can you promise me that I will be in at least as strong a shape as when I entered this room? And I felt a voice that I needed to heed. Do you think I would disrespect my own handiwork? This is the voice from on high saying, do you think I would disrespect my child? And I felt so beautiful. I felt like I have never felt before. My sense of being loved, of being worthy of love, of being cared for, of being important to someone. It's huge.
Going into doing beautiful.
One-third of individuals in the study said it's the single most spiritually significant experience of their lives. About 70% say it's among the 5 most personally meaningful experiences of their lives. And you say, well, so what does that mean? You know, and initially I thought, I wonder if they don't have pretty dull lives. But people would say, when my firstborn came into this world, I'll never forget that. And life has never been the same since. Or my father passed away. That was deeply moving to me. I'm different now in the world. And say, it's kind of like that.
The most glorious part was that it made me feel more comfortable with living, because you're not afraid of dying.
Frankly, I'm just a laboratory scientist. And I wasn't prepared for that.
From the memory of the transcendental state of consciousness, many people report less anxiety, less depression, less preoccupation with pain, closer interpersonal relationships, and perhaps most impressive, they claim to have a loss of the fear of death.
It recalibrates how they see death. It's been amazing hearing them talk about this idea of love. Many of them spoke about how nature itself is something like the substance called love. And having touched that, they've recalibrated and shaped how they die differently.
Okay, so those 2 patients have died now, but they greeted their death with optimism and hope and feeling oneness. And this is the big movement right now for the decriminalization of psilocybin in California and Oregon and elsewhere in the United States. And it comes down to this simple argument. You have a right to choose how you die. You want to die in fear and in anger and hopelessness and anguish and regret? Or do you want to die knowing that you're one with the universe? You're at peace. You understand the unanimity of being. That's a real choice. You have that choice with psilocybin. And so I think the end of death argument is the best one. We should allow this to be a personal choice for those people who want to do it. So many studies have come out for lack of time, but I'm going to jump into microdosing really quickly. Microdosing is taking a sub-threshold dose of psilocybin below that which you can feel. On the psilocybe cubensis scale, like an elevator ride, I'd like 10 floors to an elevator or to a building. 0.5 gram is the first floor, 5 grams the hero's journey. That's the 10th floor. So you're taking about 1/4 to a 1/10 of a gram to a 20th of a gram, somewhere in there. So 1/10 to 20th of a gram of psilocybe cubensis just below the threshold of having an effect. Really interestingly, I know all sorts of straight people, believe it or not, who would never consider tripping on psilocybin. But the concept of them taking a microdose that could increase neurogenesis and fight depression and senility and dementia, well, that's a whole different subject. Plus, they want to feel cool with their grandkids, right? And they're not saying, yeah, microdosing. So anyhow, microdosing has swept Silicon Valley. I know several people who actually teach coders at the major Silicon Valley internet companies. All of you know the names of these companies. And the coders feel that it is giving them greater creativity. Amazingly, Roland Griffiths just published this 3 weeks ago. I thought they're going to go from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. Schedule 1 means that a drug has no medical use and high potential for abuse. And Roland Griffiths and his team has written an article arguing it should be moved to Schedule 4, the least restrictive drug designation there is, similar to asthma medicine. So meetings have been happening with the FDA. I'm privy to some of the internal conversations. The FDA, when they were approached by a group of these scientists saying it's good for PTSD for the war veterans, the FDA interrupted them and said, no, this is good for PTSD on any level. They said they've never seen a drug so powerful with so much benefit with such low potential for abuse. Now, those of you who have not tripped on these mushrooms may not understand. This is not like marijuana or alcohol where you want to get high the next day or have another beer. After you trip on these mushrooms, the next day you look at them and you go, no way. Stay away. I'm done for a while. They have no potential for abuse, you know? Okay. So I'm going to show you something that is a little controversial. There are some therapists here, and there are some people who have DEA licenses. So I'm speaking to those people in particular, just so you don't get any ideas here. The psilocybe cyanescens and azurescens, they're really different. Azurescens is huge. So I've invented blue juice. You take ice cubes, you chop up a psilocybe mushroom. It's really counterintuitive for chemical extraction because typically you want hot, solvents for better extraction. Nope, not in this case. It took me forever to figure this out. You take ice cubes, you chop up the mushrooms, you put them in a refrigerator, and they slowly melt over 4 or 5 days. And they extract the psilocybin without the beta-glucans and all the other mushroom material. So then you can make ice cubes for Burning Man. Strictly for scientific research, okay? How many people have read Michael Pollan's book? Yeah. And, it's a great intro book for the psychedelically naive. A lot of us veterans, have some criticisms about it, but Michael's done a great job in making the bridge to a different audience of individuals who would not consider it because he has so much credibility. So I want to close in 5 minutes if I can here. There's another mushroom called lion's mane. This is legal. It's a potent nerve growth stimulant factors that are within it. It regenerates myelin on the axons of nerves. There's been 2 clinical studies on this. At a mild cognitive impairment, double-blind placebo-controlled clinical study, significant increase in cognitive function in tests from consuming these mushrooms for about 25 days on an order of about 4 to 6 grams of these mushrooms, once in the morning and once in the evening by capsules. It causes neurogenesis, and particularly it removes amyloid plaques. There's 2 really interesting studies with mice, where they inject mice with a toxic polypeptide that induces amyloid plaque formation. Amyloid plaque formation is associated with Alzheimer's patients upon resection after death. Amyloid plaque can be confirmed in degeneration of myelin, and the presence of amyloid plaque interferes with neurotransmission. The mice, when they were fed full-blown Alzheimer's-like symptoms with amyloid plaque, when they were fed the lion's mane mushrooms 3 to 4 weeks later, it resolved. Amyloid plaque had been largely removed. In demonstration of maze experiments, they then were able to navigate maze to near normal conditions, where prior to that, they were confused and unable to navigate. So there was both resection improving microscopically as well as behavior. This is a really important mushroom. I would ask all of you to consider taking this mushroom on a daily basis. We're all going to suffer some sort of type of neurological decline, and this is a fact of aging. And so lion's mane mushrooms can be found in the wild. They grow here in California. And then, unfortunately, the price of psilocybin is $7,000 per gram. So I had a dream. And I came up with a stacking formula, a epigenetic neurogenic formula, stacking psilocybin, lion's mane, and vitamin B3, nicotinic acid. So those of you who are older here may remember this. I'd like to have a show of hands. How many people remember in the 70s, in particular, that if you're tripping on LSD or psilocybin, if you took niacin, you could come down? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people. It turned out not to be true, but that's the conventional wisdom. I've taken you've got niacin flush, it excites the endpoints of your nervous system. Well, neuropathy oftentimes is seen as the dieback of your nerves at your fingertips and your toes. So neuropathies oftentimes are presented that way. I thought if you stack it with niacin, you can excite the nerve endings. And we know that lion's mane regenerates myelin on the axons of nerves. And we know that psilocybin causes neurogenesis at the tips. Why not stack these together? So this, I think, I want to reinvent psilocybin as a vitamin. Taking a sub-threshold doses below the levels of intoxication. The niacin also serves a purpose of like anti-abuse. The patients will not be able to abuse it. The adverse effects of a niacin flush, if you those who've taken a lot of niacin, you're itching, you're red, people will talk to you, what's wrong with you? It's a very, very negative reaction. So this is a way of stacking these together for epigenetic neurogenesis. And we lose body intellect of our culture with the aging population. We're losing Einsteins every day because of neurodegeneration. This is a loss to our cultural knowledge. And it's so important that we give the knowledge to the next generation to pass on. That next generation is going to become elders. So if you can stack these and increase your ability to increase your intelligence, I think this is really important. In the future. Okay, I'm going to, if anyone wants to leave for lunch, I'm going to try to stop by. I have to tell you this story. It's too friggin' cool. I just heard this, and I was with some physicians, and this chef up in Vancouver told me this 3-4 days ago. I said, this is crazy. This is so fantastic. Now, any Canadians here may know this game, and people from Germany, but he was in the Yukon or up in that area, and there's a family reunion, 150 people, big bar scene, lots of music, people drinking, smoking. He doesn't do any of that stuff. And he was sitting at our table, and it was all guys, and they have this little game. And they put nails on a pine board, and they have the nail heads are this big, but the hammer is this big. It's a bar game. They play it all over the world now. I guess in Asia they do it too. And the idea is you put money on the table and you pound the nail down. So, he's never played this before. Everybody else is pretty intoxicated, but he goes in the bathroom and someone says, hey, you want some psilocybin? He goes, well, I heard about it. Sure. So he takes a dose of psilocybin and waits about 20, 30 minutes. He gets invited to this little game. He's not tripping. He's feeling it. Wow, this is really interesting. And he said he just got tunnel vision, just excluded all the noise. And all these macho Canadian, guys, and all trying to outperform each other. And they're going around. It's his turn. And he looks at it, tunnel vision, takes a hammer, boom, nailed it, literally, right down. They go to put $10 around. Bam! Does it again, 2 times in a row. 8 times in a row. Everybody at the table is freaking out. And then he said, I had to do it. I go, what? He goes, the guy that was freaking out the most, he looked at him in the eyes and went, bam! They lost it. Well, this makes sense. This is an example of a case. If you are throwing a spear against a saber-toothed tiger, the increase in agility, the increase in being able to perceive, to cognitively strategize against an opponent, an adversary, against climate change. I think that these compounds have enormous potential for increasing intelligence, acuity, and skills. Okay, now this is important for you to know, is the mice injected with low doses of psilocybin extinguish the conditioned fear response, not the high doses. High doses, no doubt, will do it, but clinically showing that the low doses had a better influence than the higher doses. This is also an argument for having a nootropic vitamin for treating depression long term. You have to be careful about deadly gallerinas. They're poisonous. They have rusty brown spores. I have 65 videos up on Instagram. I call them knowledge bombs. I drop them every few days. There's a bunch up there right now that you can go to my Instagram account and see these little knowledge bombs. They're 1 minute long talking about this mushroom. So I want to just close. I have 4 more slides here. This is Gymnopolis luteofolius. This is getting a little esoteric. This is an extremely rare psilocybin active mushroom. It does have rusty brown spores. That's why we don't advocate people look for it. But this is so crazy.
It only shows on boats.
Okay, this is July 8th, 2011, and it's just hard to believe that Paul Stamets' boat will be growing a psychoactive mushroom. But it's true. I know it's not the best specimen right now, but this is Gymnopolis luteofolius. It is unique to alder. It's a very rare species. In fact, most mycologists would not be able to identify it. I just happen to have a specialty in this area. And it's so weird because my friend Clay here, hey Clay, he said he found a mushroom going off of a boat and he brought it to me from your friend, right?
That Harstein Island boat launch.
And it was also Gymnopolis luteofolius. So it begs the question now, is this mushroom indigenous to Northwest boats? And I've never found this in the wild. I've seen it at a mycological society, but I go figure. Now, I'm not going to pick it, so I guess I'm not breaking the law. Or am I breaking the law because it's growing here and I know what it is? I don't know what to do. Anyhow, how bizarre. Gymnopolis luteofolius on Stamets' boat, and we've had more than one sighting of this on this boat and more than one boat now, 2 boats. So go figure.
This may be why some of the European species came to the United States with pilgrims. Many of the ships that were brought over were then reconstructed into houses. So the mycelial footprints, came across the ocean. It's very plausible. Okay, so weird science. This just came out about 2 months ago. And cicadas, 17 years in the ground, they come up. I grew up in Ohio. We had cicadas, I had several experiences with cicadas there. And they get these fuzzy butts. Well, the fuzzy butt, it actually decomposes their sexual organs. Their genitalia falls off, but they can still fly. And the males then will mimic female behavior to entice a male cicada to get close to it, because it was just discovered that fungus in his butt is packed full of psilocybin. Yeah, psychoactive cicadas. And those of you, when I was a kid, I saw these little fuzzy butts, but no one ever decided to analyze them. So they have this sort of mimicry of sex acts to entice, and the females then also do the same, and back and forth to attract. So the spores will dust on the other cicadas, and then they go underground, and this fungus lives in subterraneously. But where is this going to stop, folks? So next cicada outburst, there's going to be all these psychonauts out there collecting them and making teas of cicadas. I don't know what's going to happen with this. So, all right, folks, I want to just close with this 1 2-minute little film here. Mushroom mycelium represents rebirth, rejuvenation, regeneration. Fungi generate soil that gives life. The task that we face today is to understand the language of nature. My mission is to discover the language of nature of the fungal networks that communicate with the ecosystem. And I believe nature is intelligent. The fact that we lack the language skills to communicate with nature does not impugn the concept that nature is intelligent. It speaks to our inadequacy for communication. If we don't get our act together and come in commonality and understanding with the organisms that sustain us today, not only will we destroy those organisms, but we will destroy ourselves. We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that? If I die trying, but I'm inadequate to the task to make a course change in the evolution of life on this planet, okay, I tried. The fact is, I tried. How many people are not trying? If you knew that every breath you took could save hundreds of lives into the future, had you walked down this path of knowledge, wouldn't you run down that path of knowledge as fast as you could? I believe nature is a force of good. Good is not only a concept, it is a spirit. And so hopefully the spirit of goodness will survive. Thank you very much, folks.